Shalom and good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcasting to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, 3 IDF soldiers were injured in the West Bank as a Palestinian motorist deliberately ran them over. An explosion in the Gaza Strip kills 4 Palestinians and wounds some 30 others in the southern city of Rafah along the Egyptian border. Egypt stages a show of international support as it inaugurates a major extension of the Suez Canal. 3 IDF soldiers were deliberately run down and injured in the West Bank yesterday near the Jewish settlement of Shiloh by a Palestinian motorist who was then shot as he tried to exit his vehicle. 2 of the soldiers were in critical condition, and the third, who reportedly killed the attacker, was in light condition.
Got 2 casualties, both of them from the terrorist attack near Shiloh. Both of them have multi-trauma and seems to be severely injured.
The soldiers were stationed in that area as part of an Israeli effort to thwart a further deterioration in violence since the incident in the West Bank village of Duma, in which a Palestinian 18-month-old toddler was burned alive, believed by Israeli security officials to be at the hands of Jewish ultra-nationalists. With peace talks stalled since April of 2014, grassroots violence has simmered in the West Bank and adjacent East Jerusalem. In related news, Israel demanded of the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon that he condemned the vehicular attack at the Shiloh Junction yesterday and the Palestinian leadership's incitement to terror. Israeli ambassador to the UN, Ron Prosor, said that this was the 3rd time this week that he had called on the UN Secretary General to condemn a terror attack against Israeli citizens. He said that Ban's silence was particularly grating in light of his fierce and quick condemnations when terror is directed against others. Now to the Gaza Strip, where an explosion killed 4 Palestinians and wounded some 30 others in the southern city of Rafah along the Egyptian border. The Islamist Hamas group, which controls the Gaza Strip, blamed the blast on an unexploded Israeli missile from last year's conflict. The explosion destroyed the residence of Ayman Abu Nakira, a senior Hamas member. He was reportedly wounded in the explosion, while his son and 3 other relatives were killed. In other news, Islamists have reportedly fired 3 rockets in the direction of Israel's southern communities last night, but the rockets exploded in the vicinity of the Palestinian enclave. No injuries or damage were reported, and no organization has claimed responsibility for the fire. Now, with regard to the Islamic Republic, Tehran has denied allegations following the publication by an American think tank which accuses Iran of cleaning up its Parchin military site, where some countries suspect experiments may have taken place in a possible nuclear weapons program. The US-based Institute for Science and International Security pointed to satellite images showing vehicles and container-like objects being moved at Parchin. Iran claims this was part of roadworks in that area. The American think tank said the images were taken after Iran signed the nuclear agreement with the P5+1, the United States, Russia, China, France, Britain, and Germany. Such activity might complicate the work of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, whose job is to judge whether Iran's past nuclear activity had any military dimensions, including through access to Parchin. U.S. State Department spokesman Mark Toner said he could not confirm the group's findings, but that any clear-up effort would be cause for concern.
This isn't something you can't cover up past nuclear activity very easily. It lasts for decades, even longer. And so, this isn't something, I think as the Secretary said, you can simply flush down the toilet. There are traces that remain, and we're confident in our ability to be able to fully investigate and to find out if the evidence does remain of these previous activities. we in the international community have been very clear about our concerns about Iran's past activities, and this includes its efforts to clean up suspect sites. So while cleanup activities, and again, I'm not confirming this, would always be a cause for concern, particularly at this site where IAEA has already requested access, but we're confident in our knowledge of what has actually occurred in Parchin.
White House spokesman Josh Earnest separately played down any such Iranian efforts, although he said at a daily briefing he could not discuss any specific intelligence matters. Now to other regional news. Syria's foreign minister Walid al-Mualem made his first visit to the Gulf in more than 4 years, meeting his Omani counterpart in Muscat for talks on ways to end the ongoing conflict in his country. The visit, his first to the Gulf since his country descended into conflict in 2011, coincides with heightened diplomatic efforts to end the 4-year conflict in Syria. Oman sees itself as a conciliator in a volatile region and has a history of constructive relations with Syria's close ally Iran. In the meeting, Mualem and Omani's foreign minister Yusuf bin Alawi agreed that any solution should be based on meeting the aspirations of the Syrian people in the fight against terrorism and should ensure the stability, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Syria. More on Syria. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who is touring the region to garner support for the nuclear agreement with Iran, said he reached an agreement with his Russian counterpart on a draft UN resolution aimed at identifying the perpetrators of chemical weapons attacks in Syria.
But yes, we also talked about the UN resolution. And indeed, I believe, reached an agreement that should try to see that resolution voted on shortly, which will create a process of accountability, which has been missing.
Diplomats say the UN Security Council is likely to vote today on a U.S. proposal to ask UN Chief Ban Ki-moon and the global chemical weapons watchdog to assemble a team of investigators to lay blame for toxic gas attacks in Syria. Attributing responsibility for chemical weapon attacks would pave the way for action by the 15-member Security Council. The body has already threatened consequences, including sanctions for such attacks. Russia, which has veto power on the UN Security Council, is a Syrian ally and has protected President Bashar Assad's government from any UN action during the 4-year civil war. The United States began discussing the draft resolution with Russia several months ago. Now to Israel's western neighbor, where Egypt staged a show of international support as it inaugurated a major extension of the Suez Canal, which President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi hopes will power an economic turnaround in the Arab world's most populous country.
عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية ببدء تشغيل قناة السويس الجديدة وتحيا مصر وتحيا شعوب العالم المحبة للسلام.
Leaders of France, Russia, Arab, and African states attended the ceremony. The $8 billion new Suez Canal project was completed in just 1 year instead of 3 on Sisi's order, but economists and shipping analysts question whether there is sufficient traffic and east-west trade to meet its ambitious revenue targets. The canal expansion is the centerpiece of a grand agenda by President Sisi to cement his tenure as the man who brought stability and prosperity to Egypt after he ousted elected Muslim Brotherhood President Mohamed Morsi in 2013 following mass protests. This is all from us here in Jerusalem. Thank you for watching us. I'm Jonathan Hassan. Have a Erev Tov and Shabbat Shalom. We will see you again on Monday at the same time.